Hi, I'm Nancy McCaochan. Welcome to Living Karma Yoga, a program that presents all of the many yoga things or many things that yoga has to offer, from posture to pranayama, which is breathing techniques, to mudra, which are hand positions, channeling energy in specific ways, meditation, lifestyle, nutrition, travel, and so very, very much more that helps you take your yoga off the mat, which is really where it belongs. Yoga is more than posture, it's more than breathing techniques. It's about a way of life, and it's about being centered and understanding that prosperity is everywhere, about being present for every moment of their lives. So we're hoping that these programs give you some tools to help you be more equanimous, more peaceful, more joyful, and live the life of prosperity and joy that you truly deserve. My guest today is Valerie Weir, and Valerie is a longtime friend and fellow yoga teacher. She's been practicing Kundalini Yoga since 1973 and trained directly with Yogi Bhajan, who brought Kundalini to the West in 1969. She also served as a teacher trainer for the Kundalini Yoga Institute, and she has extensive experience in sound healing with Gong Master Dankan Ro. She's a practicing evolutionary astrologer, and she studied under astrologer Stephen Forrest, and she's here today to talk to us about not only astrology, but particularly evolutionary astrology. When I was in my 20s, I worked, well, early 20s, I worked at a library, a local library, and one of the most fascinating sections for me was the section on astrology. And I took the books down, and I actually learned how to do there were no programs to figure things out. I spent a lot of time at that library, at the Cleveland Public Library, in the stacks, and I learned the mathematics to construct a chart for myself and every one of my family members. And I'm the oldest of 6 children for my parents, my siblings, and I had a really good time doing it. I loved the mathematics, and then I'd look at the chart and I'd think, what does that mean? And it was years later, and I would read things and I'd read about it, and you know, most of the books that we read, they explain it, but they explain part by part. So they'll explain, oh, this is what your sun sign means, or your zodiac sign. This is what your moon sign means, and this is where what your Venus means. And so, but putting it all together is about getting a picture of a full human being. And I had this epiphany once that the chart, the birth chart that we have kind of is an imprint in our nervous systems as we come out of the womb, where the planets are all in arrangement someplace, and that imprints our nervous system in a particular way. And I could be totally wrong. Valerie can tell me whether I am or not. But it's that sense that this is who I am, and it's reflected in the planets the way they are at my birth or at anybody's birth. And we live in an era now when we think that the planets are distant and they have no bearing on who and what we are. And yet, everything is vibration, and so the vibrations, the speed of the planets, their density, their personality, if you will, has an impact on who we are, on our nervous systems, and an imprint on who we are as human beings. So I've been fascinated with it forever, and I use it, understanding where the planets are at particular times, to look at my natal chart and say, oh, this is an issue I'm working on right now. Okay, it can go away. And then I have one more thing to say about that before I let Valerie talk, or invite her to talk and explain it a little bit. But there was a time shortly after I divorced, when I was still living in Ohio, that I felt very, very depressed. And I was exploring alternative medicines and alternative therapies. And I had a therapist too, a psychological therapist. So I went to my homeopath, and he had given me things when I had asthma that actually helped my asthma, and that didn't work. I went to my therapist and talked, and that didn't work. And then I went to an astrologer friend who had the ability to intuit a chart. She would look at somebody's chart and go, oh, Saturn and Mars are doing this, that must feel really awful, or oh, that must be really exciting. And she was able to intuitively feel those planetary energies to interpret things. So she looked at my chart, she went, oh, Saturn, which is the planet that represents or gives us the energy of work and focus and concentration, is on your ascendant, which is kind of how we present to the world. She said, that must feel really awful. She said, but don't worry, it'll be gone in 2 years. And now 2 years for somebody might be, oh my God, I have to do this for 2 years. But for me, that was the most hopeful thing that I learned and the most helpful from my psychological therapist, my homeopath, because I recognized that this was a process that was going on. This was time limited, and there was something to learn about it, and that it would pass. So that's my tiny understanding of how astrology can be helpful in our daily lives and what an evolutionary astrologer might be doing. And I'm going to turn it over to
Well, that's a beautiful
Valerie.
Introduction to the world of astrology.
Okay.
And for myself, I would say that my greatest joy is to be in service of another person as I sit in the counseling room with them. Because that chart, that grid, that imprint that you're speaking of is greater, or we are greater than that imprint.
Right.
We are not our chart. And so sometimes people have a misconception about astrology that somehow these planets are doing something to you, when in reality we are working with them so that we can find greater meaning in our world and within ourselves. So there's this beautiful connection, as you say, in today's modern world. Sometimes we feel so separated from that whole, that what the ancients called the bindi of really yoga is astrology. And when you look at the symbol of the sun, it's a circle with a dot in it. And that dot is our presence, our own creativity that we bring to our world at the time we incarnate, in the time we are born. So what I would say about getting back to the Saturn situation, because we're going to be dealing with some Saturn energy collectively as a whole, as people, cultures, as our nation, as our world, especially in the next 2 to 3 years. But that's kind of a sidebar. I really want to stay on track here. The moment of our birth, that ascendant that you were talking about, is the way we dawn on other people.
Okay.
It's the first thing that comes up on the horizon at the moment of our birth. And many things were born at the same time that we took our incarnation. Which doesn't mean that everyone or everything is doing this particular moment of time the same way. But that moment in time that we're born, we are responsible for.
Okay, and we're responsive to it in some ways too. So as I'm thinking, you said we're not all doing it the same way. So part of how we are doing it is a response of our nervous system and who we are to that moment. Is that correct or not?
Yeah, I would say that. You know, I would say that we have a responsibility to take those cues of that moment and bring that creativity.
Okay.
Because that time of birth, regardless of whether even, I mean, we're going on another tangent here because it's infinite when we're talking about astrology. I mean, I've been studying it for 8 years professionally, but I feel as though I'm just really still on training wheels. So I'm at awe with the amount of depth that any one chart, any one moment, any one transit, which just really means how we're actually responding to a given situation, can develop a human consciousness or unconsciousness.
And that's what we're talking about in terms of evolution, is the consciousness, the evolution of consciousness, and how aware we are in a particular thing.
I think we're talking about our deep, highest vision for our soul's potential to be expressed in this particular lifetime so that we can usher in our soul's purpose.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. That is absolutely lovely.
So working with people that are tremendously dynamic and intelligent and living beautiful, rich lives, to be able to actually sit with them in a counseling session and help them further develop that soul potential is such a tremendous honor that I can't even begin to express how grateful I am for this practice and the ability to be able to serve others through the study of astrology.
And so you use the birth chart and what's happening kind of as a map?
It is a map. It's a blueprint getting back to
blueprint.
that moment in time.
Okay.
And that moment in time we carry forth. It carries with it the past, the present, and the future. So the birth chart itself is very multidimensional. It shows not only this living moment, but moments that have led up to the reason why we are here.
Okay.
And, you know, it's not so much that in our world we're seeking all the time. We're
Right.
seeking meaning. We're seeking meaning through maybe the information that we read, the yoga classes that we take, all the tools that are available for us so that we can find that soul communion. But in reality, the soul is always seeking us.
That's a really beautiful thing. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I get it, and all the Sufi poets and a lot of the poets have talked about that. But can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because I'm not sure that it's a clear thing. How does the soul seek us, and what does that mean?
I think the soul seeks us through the whole idea of even the quickening of the planets in the sky that tell the soul that it's the right time to reincarnate, so that we can be in this creative endeavor with the soul through the act of being a human.
Okay, so what reminds me of is showing up
Yes,
in awareness.
That's nice. That's an easier
Showing
way of putting
up.
it.
Okay, yeah. So it seeks us to show up and be present and be aware and take up the gauntlet, if you will, or
Right.
to perform what it is we've come here to do.
To respond.
To respond to it instead of hiding. I know I've spent a lot of my life hiding.
And even if we do hide, you know, looking at the chart, it gives perspective on why maybe a person has not shown their light.
Okay.
Because maybe they are meant to, at this particular time, slow down and be deeply personal with themselves so that they can gather that inner light and then therefore feel confident enough to express it. Maybe not at the moment of their birth or when they're 5 or when they're 6, 7, 10, or 12, but maybe when they're 35.
So it gives permission
To
to
take
rest,
time.
to take time.
Depending
yeah.
upon the person's chart.
Right.
That's why evolutionary astrology is so appealing to me, because we can look at a chart and some of the old traditional astrologers would say, oh, Saturn, that old devil, it's just so terrible and so bad. And from time to time, I have had, you know, a little bit of information can be dangerous.
Right. Oops, Pluto, you don't want to go out tomorrow.
And, you know, I can remember one time in particular I was doing, which I don't like to do very often, but I was doing a fair and I was doing mini readings. And I just don't think it gives justice to the depth of what can happen in the
Right.
counseling room over a period of an hour and a half.
Right.
With that said, it's sometimes very helpful to me personally as an astrologer because it builds my own confidence.
Right.
Because I feel I have such a responsibility to this ancient art that I don't want to get it wrong. I really want to take time and go into meditation before I sit down with another soul and really respect them in all of their facets and nuances. And in order to do that, with the type of mind I have, which is slower, I need time.
Right.
With that said, I had a girl from Russia, and she was just beside herself. And she came back three or four different times over the course of the weekend fair that I was at. And it was Saturn, Saturn, Saturn. She was so terrified, and I kept trying to reframe that idea, because even if you are born with challenges, these challenges can grow strength from pressing up against the pressure that sometimes, if we look at the planet, let me just simplify, because I know I'm probably getting a little complex for people. If we look at the planet Saturn, it has a ring around it. It is a container. It can create a situation where we are kind of pressed in, blocked, unable to express. But if we utilize the beauty of what Saturn is trying to teach us, Yogi Bhajan, Saturn teacher, he would make us push up against our limitations in order to create an inner muscle that would create this type of integrity around what we are doing, so that it will hold the test of time. So it's not something to be afraid of in the chart, in a natal birth chart.
Right.
Because usually it's about, okay, in this particular lifetime, and let me just talk a little bit about reincarnation, because not everyone agrees with that philosophy. So in the counseling room, I've worked with people that are fundamental Christians. So I've reframed it, just saying that this is the way God made you. This is your DNA, so to speak. And so we can work with different forms of philosophy, because anytime we get too strongly wedded to a philosophy with astrology, things can become somewhat rigid.
We're putting ourselves back in boxes, and there's no way to move.
Yes, and it's not an evolution then.
Right.
So the Saturn nature is that of building an inner strength so that we can feel that we are on solid ground and really know a subject well, and that we can stand by our word in integrity.
Right. And so traditional astrology, or the ones the astrology that we, in the books that I read when I was younger, would go, oh, Pluto represents this, it's really negative, and oh, Saturn represents that, and they were called benefics and malefics and blah, 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 blah. But what I hear you saying is that there's no bad, there's a challenge, and that sometimes the challenges in very particular places that we would think of as like, oh my God, no, I'm doomed for the rest of my life, is actually a challenge to grow for the soul. And it as I think about it, it portends a strength that's inherent in that individual that might not otherwise be there, because otherwise God, you know, that old saying, God doesn't give us the things that we can't handle. I don't know if that's taking you off to a place that we can't go anywhere from.
Except when you have a certain, but yeah, sometimes that saying kind of gives me pause, because there are times where I have been in the counseling room with people that have had horrendous backgrounds. And they want to know, I'm a good person.
Why?
And so the beauty of evolutionary astrology is it gives a person a perspective. It draws upon past circumstances so that you can validate that person that, yes, this was painful. And this did happen. And it did happen, and I can't really give you any sort of, I won't even pretend to say, you know, that it was something that you could take. But what I can tell you is that on the other side is the potential here for you to create so much in your life because of what you have endured that you have the potential of helping many other people, let's say, for example. So it gives people this beautiful ability to feel that there is a pearl there. It might be at great cost, but there is a pearl there.
When you look at a chart, or when people come to you to talk to you about their charts and about for a counseling session, what's the first thing you look at?
It depends upon the chart.
Okay.
Some things they just pop out at you right away, and I will go with that.
Okay.
But traditionally, to keep things clean, because you're looking at the whole cosmos.
Right. And you're looking at a huge picture with interacting
Yes, because
energies.
the middle of the chart is like the atomic energy of how all of the other planets are dialoguing with one another around this wheel of energy.
Okay.
Now there is a major cross in the chart, which is termed as the cross of matter. On one end is the eastern horizon, which is once again that rising sign, and that's usually, getting back to your question, what I usually take a look at first.
Okay.
Because once again, this is how we present in the world. And it's an important thing. It's not superficial. Sometimes it's known as the mask that we wear.
Right.
My teacher, Stephen Forrest, calls it the stained glass through which all the other portions of the persona shine through.
Okay.
And if we don't have a way of driving our vehicle, which is the way I like to look at it, then we don't know how to maybe have a dialogue in an interview session like this.
Right.
It may not be integrated in the chart with the other facets, like that stained glass energy, or it may be overactivated where we end up just using our persona, the way we show up, the car that we drive, without activating the other facets of ourselves. So I take a look at that because usually in childhood, that's what is really most apparent to the family members, and how we are usually treated, because this is how we appear to be.
Right.
Okay? So that's a nice starting point for people, and many people know what their rising sign is, their ascending sign is. That's why it's important to know your birth time if you're thinking about getting a consultation, because that changes every few moments.
Right.
That ascendant moves very quickly. On the other side of the chart, the other cross of matter in the Western Hemisphere, is what's called the descendant. And this is the energy of the other, how we respond in tow to the other. Okay? Makes sense?
Got it? Yep.
Okay. At the top of the chart is this midheaven, associated with Saturn. It's really what we are going to leave creatively on the planet, our gift to humanity, that will hold the test of time. And it doesn't have to be some lofty thing.
No, it could be as much as being a good mom.
Exactly. And giving that inheritance to the next generation of mothers.
Right.
So this is how we actually contribute in the world. Top of the chart, top of the mountain, associated with Capricorn, associated with the 10th house. If I'm getting too technical, just
That
stop
is a
me.
little
Miss.
bit too technical.
Okay.
And Capricorn is earthy
Zodiac sign.
Yeah.
That
So,
it gives personality to the planet Saturn, which it's ruled by.
okay.
So I'm giving a little lesson,
Right. Okay. So go down to.
and that's where it's located.
Right.
In a natural chart.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay.
In astrology, the new year, let's say, is the first day of spring,
Right. Right.
not January 1st.
Right. So it's with the sun coming into to spring, crossing the horizon, or the projection of the equator into the sky.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So
Bottom of the chart.
Bottom of the chart. Yep.
That would be the nadir,
Okay.
the most internal portion. In yoga, we call it yin,
Okay.
related to the moon, related to the astrological sign of Cancer, which we will be entering pretty soon during the summer solstice. So this is our evolving sense of being okay with self-reflection, returning inward, rather than the top of the chart moving into the
Outward.
world and
Right,
out.
right.
Okay? So all of these angles are very important. They're called the cross of matter, through which all the other planets and signs kind of hang upon.
And interact, and you know, we're out of time.
What?
So what we leave you with is this circle with the cross of matter and planetary energies throughout. And each one of us has a different configuration, and each one of us has a different soul purpose that's expressed in that configuration. Is that something that you would agree with, or
And
not?
as evolutionary astrologers, we use a lot of energy around what are called the nodes of the moon,
Okay, yeah. So
which moving from our past inclinations, gathering what we did that served us, and then moving that into how are we going to do this to the best arc of our potential in this
in
particular
this
lifetime.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
Thank you at home for watching. And if you'd like to know more about Valerie and evolutionary astrology, you can contact her through Karma Yoga. You can find us on our website, www.karma-yoga.net. You'll find our schedule there. You'll find bios of all of our teachers, and we hope to see you in class sometime soon. Thanks, Val.
Thank you.
May the long time sun shine upon you.